hell are you doing out here?
Roll20.
What the hell are you? No! 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 Damn it!
Roll20.
I'm going to start this video with a preface. The usefulness of a tool is based on its application. And I think there's instances where both of these VTTs, one could be better than the other in any specific use case. And as for my experience with these, Foundry I've only been using for about 2.5 months-ish, to whereas Roll20 I had used for about 4.5 years. I started using Roll20 back in 2015 and Foundry in May of 2020, so that should hopefully give you an idea of how much I know of one compared to the other. And yeah, so with that, let's go ahead and get into comparing the two of them. I think the first topic we're going to cover, and the one probably most pertinent to you as a customer, is costs. How much does it cost to use Roll20? How much does it cost to use Foundry? So let's compare the two, and first we'll go ahead and start with Roll20. Starting with Roll20, one of the big benefits of the platform is the ability to play for entirely free. You get some ads that show up on the main page as well as when you load in to the editor, but if you want higher quality features and to get rid of those ads, you'll need to pay $5 a month for a Plus subscription and $10 a month for a Pro subscription. For this comparison, comparing the two VTTs, I'm going to be going ahead and using the Pro level subscription, as that is the one I have the most experience with and also serves as Roll20's highest tier of subscription. Though, again, I do think that being able to play for entirely free, paying absolutely nothing to play D&D, is something that is definitely a strength of Roll20's. Now watch me fail to say ability to play like 7 times in a row. Is the ability to pay the ability to play the fucking hell. The ability to pay fucking holy shit. Ability to play for Jesus Christ. Okay, back to Foundry. Foundry uses a single license cost of $50 for the software. That's it. You don't pay any subscriptions or tiers thereof. You just pay once for the software, which was around retail price of a game, for example, and you have it forever. For me, this coupled with the quality of features later to be compared in the video, paints Foundry as the clear winner. If you want to play for free on a VTT, then Roll20 is a fine platform, but if you want any kind of higher quality features and you don't want to be bled for cash over the course of months and years, then I think definitely you should go with Foundry. It's giving you something at the price point where Roll20 is giving you only its mid-tier subscription for a year. So, yeah, Foundry for me. The next thing we're going to be comparing is connectivity, and almost as if it's going to be a trend, we're going to be starting with Roll20. So, after you made your account and a game, subsequently, you will invite your friends via an invite link that you can get within the editor. They need to make their accounts, and then they can join your invite. And if you want to kick or promote another player to GM, you will need to do so on the game's page outside of the editor. In the case of Foundry, there are 3 main ways to host your game. You have self-hosted, cloud-hosted, and partner-hosted. I'm not going to go into the specifics of each one, but here are the basics. Self-hosted is hosting a game directly from your machine, where players connect to your IP address, and the server is only up whenever you have your Foundry open. Cloud-hosted is where there is a dedicated server running the server 24/7, so people can connect to it anytime, and you and your players will both connect to the server's IP address from your browsers. And then partner-hosted is the one most similar to Roll20, where you can pay one of Foundry's sponsored partners to host your game on one of their platforms. Then they'll give you a link, and you can connect to that. Me and my players were pretty amazed with how easy it was to connect to Foundry. I'm used to port forwarding, so that I just did self-hosted, and they were able to connect with literally just my IP address, the port. And it's so great because nobody has to make any accounts. You just set up player profiles, which they all log into after joining the link. And yeah, that's it. It's really good. The only issue with it is that if you have somebody who lives really far from you, because your machine itself is the server, they may experience lag or a bit of a more unstable connection because, you know, for me, like I have players who live halfway across the world, sometimes their connection's a little spotty, but that can be amended by just using a partner host, which is better situated between you and your player. All in all, I think Foundry has a lot more flexibility in its connectivity options, and it doesn't require anyone except for you, the person who bought the software, to make an account, which is really, really good for people who don't like making accounts. This comes at a little more legwork for you as the GM, but not really that much in my opinion. So for me, point for Foundry. Hey, seems like you noticed that my shirt, facial hair, and mic placement now keep changing. Yeah, this shit's taking a long time to record. Now, the fun part. It's time to talk about features, and we're going to be starting with the lighting systems of Foundry and Roll20. I think it's fair to say that Roll20 kind of pioneered the dynamic lighting systems in virtual tabletops, and with them rolling out advanced fog of war and dynamic lighting updates, it's time to see if they still hold up. As is, Roll20 has its legacy dynamic lighting as well as its updated dynamic lighting, giving you features such as restricting movement based on where the walls are, only updating when a token has been placed, and these settings are basically interchangeable between the legacy and the updated. Both have the same settings now. There was an issue before where updated did not have only update on drop or restrict movement, so basically players could just move through walls or whatever, but they have since forth fixed it, so I don't have to complain. In order to place down light on the canvas, you have to grab a token, put it on the dynamic lighting layer, and have it emit light. In my opinion, and I kind of touched on this in the rant a little bit, it's a bit tedious having to constantly find and place down tokens, but that is the way you will have to place down lights other than sort of token controlled light. And somebody's calling me. Also, something that's kind of annoying is that walls that do not perfectly align to grid are kind of nightmarish to set up. You basically have to like click, re-click, like undo, re-click, and just keep doing that until you get it perfectly. You can get good at it, but it's really tedious. And also there's no circles. There's just no, you can't do circles. That part's kind of frustrating for a lot of certain map designs, like towers specifically are really, really hard. But you can kind of amend the circle issue with an API script. But then again, it's an issue that I really feel like shouldn't be there. As for the Fog of War settings, Roll20's Fog of War has been notorious for, or like the legacy Fog of War has been notorious for being a buggy mess that everyone hates. But the new updated Fog of War is actually not that bad. My only problem with it being this weird bug where like the edges of the Fog of War will just start to sort of show you the end of the map, like they won't load. So it's, other than that, which is basically just a nitpick anyway, I don't really have any problems with Roll20's new Fog of War. The old one, garbage. Taking a look at the new kit on the block, Foundry's dynamic lighting works and is configured much in the same way as Roll20's, with a few key notable exceptions. But to start, you edit global lighting rules within the scene configuration, basically the Foundry equivalent of page settings. You can specify token-specific rules within the Vision tab of the token editor. And also, there's the addition of colored lights. Yay! I think updated dynamic lighting in Roll20 might have colored lights now, but I have to double check. Speaking of lights, placing down one is literally as simple as going to the light tool and click and dragging. If you want any kind of like specified radius, all you have to do is just double click the light and you'll be able to edit it to be, let's say, 30 dim, 15 bright, for example, and boom, perfectly good light. Also, and I'll touch on modules later, There's a module called Dancing Lights, which allowed Foundry to have a lot of cool lighting effects, such as like fire or electrical crackling or whatever, added to your lights. Henceforth, the developer has said that they are planning to add that into native Foundry functionality. So, yeah, that's something that's recent and also is really cool. As for the light source itself, you can do a lot of customizability with it. You can move it around, edit to specify a specific position on the grid using XY coordinates, radius, angle, rotation, color, opacity, and what level of darkness the light activates at. So if the canvas is a certain lowness of light, the light will then turn on. Additionally, you can transform the canvas from day to night, effectively having the canvas darkness level shift from its highest point to lowest point, or vice versa, which combined with the darkness threshold setting, as I mentioned earlier, can allow you to create really cool lighting transitions where, like, let's say you have a scene that's slowly fading to night and all the lights turn on once it gets dark. Basically at the click of a button, so... You may have noticed in that thing there, the camera panning. Trust me, we'll hop over that wall when we get there. And yes, that is a super, super sick and professional transition into walls. Walls are something that Foundry just gets incredibly right. There is just such variety of them, and it has its own separate tool for walls. There are normal walls, invisible walls, ethereal walls that are like kind of like Dark Souls secret wall reminiscent sort of thingies. You can specify a direction the wall works in. There are modules which will let you set the height of walls. And yeah, you can create openable doors as well. You can lock the doors and generally just make any wall that doesn't perfectly align to grid pretty easily. Literally, the only problem I have with Foundry's walls is that you can't make a perfect circle. Come on, guys. What's with circles? Why can't we do circles? I'm not a developer, but like, it doesn't sound so hard. Also, on Fog of War, it works perfectly as intended. Looks about on par with Roll20's. I kind of prefer it more to Roll20's because you don't get that weird bug. Yeah, just like comparing the two of them, while Roll20 did pioneer like dynamic lighting walls, I think Foundry just does it way better. I mean, the sheer variety of walls, the sheer variety and flexibility of dynamic lighting in Foundry, modules being able to make it way more flexible than it already was. And by the way, again, we'll talk about modules later. I mean, yeah, Foundry does dynamic lighting better. I kind of covered this in my rant. I fucking love it. Alrighty, so if I will be allowed some time to gush over this update, I think it's fucking incredible. So they've added a bunch of stuff, most of which is written here. Redesigning the dynamic lighting system, light source animations, interaction between lighting and darkness level, line of sight and vision stuff to fix a few of the like strange errant bugs that were happening with that, and then animated real time, token vision, stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff. This update's great. And if you want to get into it, you can check out the update notes, but basically just as like a showcase. So you can see I have a light set up here. I have actually a few things set up here. So first is just normal light. This is like what it is by default. So when you drag, that's what it looks like. One thing, they've added these really nice white outline markers that help you distinguish where the edges of your light are, as well as lines to indicate when it interacts with a wall. So for example, I have a wall here, and you can see exactly where that light is being blocked off. Super, super useful. This is for here as well. They've also added the ability to turn off and on lights by just right-clicking them. So as you can see, I have a light turned off here, so I can turn on, and there's a little preview of the animation stuff. I can turn that light on and off. Another really useful thing is that they have added this thing, global illumination threshold. Basically, when the darkness level goes to a certain value, it'll turn off global illumination. So right now, if I look through this token's vision, you can see that they have complete vision of the whole map. But the second I go and turn darkness level down, you can see that it's still globally illuminated. He can still see most of the map, but at some point it'll get cut off because it's exceeded the 8.0 darkness level threshold that I set. So now he just has his own vision as well as the light, and you can change the intensity of light as well. Or I think that's just color. Oops. So you can see that like you can still see through that, then you can see this color, and then you can edit the color intensity, which is what I was dragging there earlier, to be like more or less intense. There's also like different animations and stuff, which is super cool. So like it's like a pulsing one, and you can play with things like intensity and stuff to make it more or less dramatic of an animation, as well as the speed. And there's like just all these really cool different animations, which are super sick. And then there's also even animations for like darkness based effects. So they've also added support for darkness stuff, which is really useful if you want to block out different areas of the map, like vision, because you'll see here, I think full intensity, it'll be more dark. This here, you can set a darkness by typing in a negative value, basically just saying like remove light here instead of add it. And then there's these really cool effects like black hole, for example, which is like, what the hell is going on there? I actually used one of these in one of my games, and it's so cool. And then when a token like goes in, it's like other tokens can't see it and stuff. It's really neat. So yeah, like this is stuff that like dynamic lighting wise was really cool to just see happen. So yeah, there's a bunch of cool new effects. I fucking love it. For this section, I'll make it evidently clear that I am not a software engineer, nor do I claim to be. My experience with coding is minimal at best, and I don't exactly know what makes an API more or less powerful. I only have the experiences I've had with the respective APIs and the opinions of someone a little bit more knowledgeable than me. To start, Roll20's API is a feature that only users of a pro-level subscription have access to. You write scripts in JavaScript and then implement them in the API settings, in the game settings on the game's page. You can download a variety of sort of one-click installation scripts that also come with custom settings allowing you to customize the scripts as you'd like. You can also find scripts on other websites such as GitHub, where you can copy and paste the block of code, put it in a custom script, and then you can name and customize the script as you'd like. The only issue with those kinds of scripts is that you can't quite customize them as easily. Basically, you have to rely on author notes onto how to customize the script, or just be able to code yourself. So if you can't do that, then yeah, customization is only a kind of luxury you get with the one-click installation scripts. Once you have your scripts set and enabled, all you need to do then is just hop into your game and they'll be active. If you need to restart the API for any reasons, you'll need to do so in the API settings page outside of the editor. Now, keep in mind that the more scripts you use, the more likely you'll run into issues or crashes of the API or whatever. That won't crash the editor, but the API itself will stop functioning. You'll need to reset it. So keep that in mind. As for the API documentation, I personally don't see anything necessarily wrong with it. I think it seems a little clunky, but that's kind of a nitpick and a preference thing. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. On Foundry's end of things, the API is accessible to all levels of permission by default, though this can be configured in the permission settings. Foundry's API, similarly to Roll20's, utilizes JavaScript. However, the key difference is the ability to write and execute scripts within the editor, whereas with Roll20, you need to open another tab with the API settings page and reset the entire API to execute a new script. Foundry scripts can also be bound to the number keys on the macro bar, allowing you to execute a chain of scripts in a sequence, potentially giving a near autonomous nature to some of your scenes. As for the community-made scripts, they come in the form of modules, mods that can be found, downloaded, and updated from the Foundry setup screen and enabled or tweaked within the editor. This embodies one of Foundry's main tenets, which is empower community developers with a best-in-class API and modding tools, and by actively encouraging and supporting mod development, they uphold that tenet wonderfully. Foundry's API documentation is directly linked to on the website's homepage, leading you to a pretty comprehensive and well-written documentation, compliments I'm paraphrasing from one of my players who's a software engineer. I'll leave the link to both Roll20 and Foundry's API documentation in the description though, and let you decide for yourself. Additionally, Foundry's community is incredibly active with advice and support for any questions that you might have. While I was working on a scene, I offhandedly mentioned something I was trying to figure out in the API channel of Foundry's Discord. Shortly after, I was sent a message by someone who was willing to sit down and help me figure out how to produce what I was going for, offering their solutions to similar problems, and generally just being incredibly helpful. Keep in mind, I didn't ask for help in the first place. This person sought to help me out, something I still appreciate to this day. Shoutouts to Atlas. This isn't a one-time thing, by the way. People have been incredibly helpful in the Foundry Discord, so don't be afraid to ask for help over there. I've always had a soft spot for modding. It's allowed for some of my favorite experiences in gaming, as well as created entirely new games that would have never been possible otherwise, such as Gary's Mod or Enderall. Whenever developers of games or gaming software actively denounce the use of mods, it's a sign to me that they don't value the creative power and input of their communities, and that's something I can't get behind. While I haven't found Roll20 guilty of any direct denouncement so far, while looking through the pro forums, I've seen certain members of the development team discourage the use of browser add-ons, which is baffling to me, as things like the Roll20 Enhancement Suite are must-haves that amend some of the Roll20 editor's biggest issues. Foundry has done nothing but support the modding community thus far, and has given anyone the tools to improve the software in any way they'd like. Given my preference, I'm not keen to make any decisive statement about the API, other than that Foundry's is more convenient to use, execute, and is often less laggy in the client. In my opinion, I think Foundry has the decisive edge here. To start talking about compendiums, let's first define them in this context real quick. A compendium is a repository of information or data that can be added to and called on later in order to re-implement saved data in the game for convenience. In these terms, I'm going to be comparing Roll20 and Foundry's compendium systems. With Roll20's compendiums, what compendium you have access to is based on what system you're using. Some systems don't come with compendiums at all, forcing you to store every character sheet or item you want saved for later use in an archived character/handout section of the journal. For compendiums that do exist, like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you're typically given a free version of some sort of content in the system, a la the system reference document. While this gives you enough information to technically run a game, it's definitely as simplistic as it gets, and it isn't really useful beyond having a way to drag and drop hempen rope onto your sheet. In order to add to the contents of your compendium, you must purchase content from the Roll20 marketplace, such as the player's handbook, monster manual, or whatever equivalent rulebook for the system you're using. Note that if the system you're playing doesn't have a compendium at all, purchasing content in the marketplace will not create one for your game. Furthermore, there is a limited number of games that you can give access to your compendium, all of which require you to be set as the game master for the game. As for the quality of the purchased compendium content, I found it disappointing in my experience. While reviewing some of the creatures and looking at spells, some spells were lacklusterly implemented, showing only the spell card when the spell called for an attack, or certain warlock-based character sheets lacking the Eldritch Blast spell entirely, though the sheet's spellcasting feature said the character was to have the spell. Hopefully, Roll20's improved the content since then, but at the time, it was staggering to me that I was looking at paid content. Foundry has its own system for compendiums as well, allowing you to create your own repositories and populate them, or download other people's compendiums for your game. Looking back at D&D 5e, Foundry will give you access to the SRD content, much like Roll20, but instead of needing to buy the books to add to your compendium, if you already own the books, you can either use them to make your own entries in a custom compendium, or for those of you who own the books on D&D Beyond, you can use the Virtual Tabletop Assets module to integrate D&D Beyond's content into your Foundry game. Compendiums and Foundry are also able to store scripts and macros, allowing people to share all kinds of content between each other. Also, compendiums are simply files on your computer, so if you'd like to back up a compendium or even your entire world, you're able to do so by copying the files from your app data, local Foundry folder. While I initially had no issue with Roll20's compendiums beyond the quality of paid content, Foundry's compendiums, as well as their flexibility, just show a fundamentally better system than Roll20's more inflexible and slightly rapacious approach. Frequent updating is vital to the usability of a software, as no software is perfect and will need to be fixed, updated, and improved over time, especially if you're paying a subscription to use it. Updating also generates momentum for a software, as frequent, meaningful improvement means that features you personally want implemented may soon become available to you. I'm going to reiterate that I used Roll20 from 2015 up until 2020, and I've seen a good chunk of the website's evolution thus far. I can't speak on Roll20's first 3 years of development as I wasn't there to play it, but regardless, I think my experience is a good encompassment of the platform's development over time. Now, there's only one way I'd describe most of the updates I've seen added to the site over the years I've used it, and that would be ineffectual. Roll20's had a myriad of annoying and frustrating bugs and problems for years, with many of the updates to the site doing nothing to address these issues. Some examples would be the editor gradually getting laggier the longer you stayed inside it, or a bug where the canvas would randomly warp or resize at certain zoom levels, something not fixed in the infamous zoom tool update. The reason why that update was so hated, by the way, was that the improvement Roll20 made to the zoom tool made the software a nightmare to use with a trackpad, and greatly inconvenienced those who liked the plus or minus keys to edit a token's health, forcing them to roll back the update almost immediately. This, coupled with the fact that many of the previous updates, which were fairly scarce, did little to address the software's glaring issues, and it sent people into an uproar, especially considering it was an update that nobody was pushing for. Here's a list of all the bigger updates over the last few years, found on the Roll20 blog. Note that some of these titles aren't the actual titles of the updates, but instead my kind of descriptor title of what the update changed. You can see that many of these updates don't address major bugs, improve the platform's major features, or come out in quick enough succession to justify their minor nature. It's perfectly fine for a software to have small updates to fill in between much bigger ones, but over the years of using Roll20, it's only been small updates, no big ones. Not until recently, at least. If you notice the trend in the dates, bigger updates, such as the dynamic lighting or Explorer mode updates, have been coming out more frequently. If Roll20 can keep this trend up, as well as the increased frequency of updates, then sparse, ineffectual updates will hopefully be left in the software's past. I'm not too optimistic though, as it seems that most of the dev team's focus as of late is just keeping the software from collapsing on itself, and also like prettying it up a bit. New software is bound to have a high frequency of updates, especially close to its launch, and Foundry is no exception. Regardless of that though, Foundry still impresses me with consistent, meaningful updates. For example, I encountered a bug where I was unable to drag a macro stored in a compendium directly to my macro bar. It frustrated me a little bit, but as if it was fated, the bug was patched and the update posted literally on the same day. Obviously that's a coincidence, but it goes to show that the developers of Foundry are actively listening and working on making the software as best as it can be. What's even better is that for small quality of life issues, such as not being able to deselect a token by clicking on the canvas, they can and often are fixed by modules made by the community. Personally, I see that as a great thing, because that means that the developers of Foundry don't need to spend a ton of time implementing hundreds of minor quality of life changes that may be affected by preference, and instead can rely on the community to support each other, giving the developers more time to work on bigger things and giving players more choice and freedom into what features they want. Despite that, the Foundry development team has been shown to still actively work on quality of life and UI bugs on top of larger updates. They also got to eventually tackling the deselect feature, which is now in base Foundry. Speaking of larger updates, as I was writing the script, Foundry released an announcement for their World Anvil integration module, allowing you to import and view content from your World Anvil world. These updates are literally coming out faster than I can document them, my lord. While Roll20 seems to be on a trend of improvement, and I certainly hope they keep it that way, Foundry just seems to be getting better and better every day. The only thing stronger than a development team improving software is a development team and their community improving a software. Alright, I've gone ahead and elaborated on many of the larger core aspects of these VTTs that I think are important for comparing the two, but I don't think neither me nor you want to have me describe every little thing in that much detail. In this section, I'm going to rattle off a few pros and cons I didn't manage to mention in any of the previous sections. One thing I'll always give Roll20 is its relatively easy learning curve. The Roll20 team has done a good job of making the software accessible to those completely green in the world of VTTs, and they continue to do so with their recent Learning Roll20 series. Roll20 also boasts support for a frankly staggering amount of gaming systems, giving you support support for playing so many tabletop systems in one VTT. Another big plus to using Roll20 is the ability to create, advertise, and play in paid games. While the website itself doesn't offer any way to transact money, it does give you a platform for finding people willing to pay or tip you for running games, which is a small way to generate some income, though my feelings on it as a whole is something I won't elaborate on this video. Speaking of potential monetary benefit to running D&D, Roll20's been known to partner with TRPG content creators, sponsoring them and promoting their content on what is objectively a large platform in the online TRPG space. Something to note though, Roll20 has shown in the past to prioritize diversity in their selection of sponsorships, which was most clearly illustrated in the drama between Roll20 and those of the Taking 20 and Dawnforge cast. I'm in no way offering an opinion on the matter, just referencing what was shown to be true. Swiftly moving away from that topic, Roll20's Charactermancer is another one of the website's cool, unique features. If you've purchased content for your D&D 5e Compendium, you're able to go through a streamlined process of creating your character, picking content and books you purchased to add to your character, instead of needing to copy-paste blocks of text, dragging features one by one, or going, what do I need to do next constantly during character creation. I personally am so used to creating characters that a guide isn't really necessary for me, but I can see how it's really helpful for others. The next pro I'd give Roll20 is that it's another place for you to purchase TRPG content, which is then integrated into your game, whether that be through art assets made by the community or entire adventure modules. My only issue with the concept of a Roll20 market is that if you've already purchased the real books or books on D&D Beyond, you'll need to purchase them again in order to have their content implemented into Roll20's unique features. I've already mentioned most of Roll20's weak points, but there's just a couple more that I felt like I wanted to include. Firstly, I think Roll20's customer support is bad. Just plain bad. I'm gonna cite anecdotes, so feel free to disregard this point. While I still subscribe to Roll20, I had to look over their pro forums and saw a post where a user was listing their grievances with the software as well as their disappointment. When they were responded to by the Roll20 team, the response was as evasive as it could have been, implying that some of the user's problems were probably due to browser extensions. By the way, those are the only real way to mod the software and can implement some of the best quality of life changes for it, as I mentioned earlier in the API section. They also gave the user the typical corporate, "it'll get better soon" assurance, which to me screamed, we don't want to take accountability, and that really bothered me. Another experience is that of one of my players, who had to wait over a week to get a direct response to an issue, and this was pre-pandemic. If that criticism isn't concrete for you, that's perfectly fine, but here is another grievance that most certainly happened and went unnoticed by the Roll20 team for months. At the tail end of 2018, Roll20 was the victim of a data breach, and the investigation of said data breach wasn't concluded until August of 2019. Things that were leaked in the breach include names, email addresses, the last 4 digits of people's credit cards, people's most recent IP addresses, and salted password hashes. A user's playtime was leaked too, but that one's not really important. Data breach can realistically happen to any website, but I found Roll20's initial response to be kind of lackluster, and that's why I'm mentioning it. One last tidbit to mention on Roll20's list of miscellaneous criticisms is the upload limit on image and audio files. Since Roll20 hosts its own servers, there was no way it could afford to allow users to upload files of any size, but the limitation they do put on their pro users is baffling. You can only upload images under 10 megabytes to the canvas, and audio files less than 20 megabytes, so look forward to compressing all of your larger map and audio files. I'll never miss an opportunity to gush over and praise Foundry, because I legitimately love its unique features. One of my favorites being the custom icons for abilities, features, spells, and items. Seeing a cool picture next to my abilities brings back the World of Warcraft nostalgia, especially combined with the ability to put them on my macro bar. Useful and stylish. Another amazing feature is the player mouse tracking, where you can see the positions of other players' mouses on the canvas as little colored dots. This makes it incredibly easy to see things other players are pointing out without needing to use the ruler tool, and also serves as a great cat distraction. Also, if you don't like to see them all the time, there is a module available for turning them off. As if it wasn't already easy to point stuff out to players, Foundry supports token targeting, allowing you to specifically point out other tokens. Are you trying to firebolt one specific hobgoblin among a myriad of others? Let your GM know exactly which goblinoid is to feel your wrath by targeting them. The default controls for targeting are a bit clunky, but again, this is an issue that can be fixed by a module. Locational audio is another unique feature Foundry has to boast, which lets you place down a radius of sound that triggers when a token enters it. Placing a point of audio is just as easy as placing down lights in Foundry, and you can even have the audio adjust the volume based on the token's proximity to its center. Campfires, waterfalls, a tavern bard, all of these wonderful sounds can be placed in specific areas of your map, and conform to the rules of walls, again, much like the lighting system. The map itself is also a grade above what Roll20 offers, giving you a system for weather effects, a higher resolution canvas, and no upload limit on map images. Since you're able to host a Foundry game on your own machine, the limit to a file size is entirely based on what you can have saved on your computer. 10 megabyte limit be damned. The last unmentioned pro of Foundry I've thought of is an incredibly customizable feature/spell/item card. Being able to specify multiple sources of damage, the range, target, and conditions of use, or being able to track the resources of an ability, as well as having it automatically recharge on a specified condition is just bewildering. With all the amazing amount of customization and configuration Foundry allows, there lies a single foreseeable problem with the software, and that's simply the learning curve. A higher learning curve comes inherent with Foundry's strengths, and it's the main reason why I think Foundry isn't necessarily right for everyone. While the documentation on the software has been steadily increasing, it's still a lot to take in for someone new to the hobby, let alone an experienced player like me. The next regrettable but definitely amendable issue with Foundry is the lack of gaming systems compared to Roll20. There's still a good amount of variety, but against the software that has been established for much longer, there's no real way Foundry could have compared in this regard. Staple systems like D&D 5e or Pathfinder 2nd Edition are implemented, and I'm sure there are plenty more systems on the way, but as is, this is a con of the software. The last issue I'm going to mention is one that was actually partially amended recently by a module, and that's the lack of native mobile support. Foundry is a powerful software, and thus tends to require more from the hardware to perform well. That combined with no official mobile support means it's probably not viable to use the software on mobile platforms. It's definitely something I've seen a lot of interest in, so hopefully there's a solution in the near future. Thinking about it though, I remember Roll20's mobile support being an absolute trash fire, so no rush I guess. When Foundry released on May 27th of 2020, I had already been testing it for a month, and I knew I wanted to jump ship from Roll20. I believe Roll20 serves its purpose as a decent VTT platform where you can play for completely free and have access to a handful of really neat features, assuming you have the money to spend on them, which, in saying that, seems incredibly counterintuitive. If you, however, want a far more flexible and powerful VTT with regular and effectual updates at the cost of a higher skill ceiling and learning curve, then I think Foundry is the clear choice. Features that Roll20 took years to implement come right out of the box, and it often does them much better, all at a single license cost as opposed to Roll20's subscription service. I'll always have a fond place in my heart for Roll20. It's the first VTT I ever played, and it gave me the platform I needed to get into the TRPG hobby in the first place. I do think, however, that the lack of competition has allowed Roll20 to be stagnant for years, and now that the competition has arrived, it's time to move on. Anyhow, thank you immensely for taking the time to watch my video. It took a lot more work than I was expecting, but here it is, and I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, and if you're down to get more TRPG/video essay content coming to you at some point within the next millennia, then go subscribe. I probably won't disappoint. Maybe. But yeah, that's all for me. See ya.